Good evening, everyone. I'm Carrie Retlin. I'm your home fund manager. Welcome to our meeting tonight and listening session about the City of Olympia's mitigation site and our plans to move that site from Franklin to Quince Street in downtown. As we get started, I want to have our city manager, Jay Burney, say a few words and kick us off. Jay?
Thanks, Carrie. Good evening, everybody. Again, Jay Burney, City Manager. I just want to take a moment to welcome all of you to the meeting tonight to hear your concerns and questions around our proposal to move our mitigation site to the property we've acquired on Quince Street. I want to state up front as we get into this meeting that we are not simply picking up the old site and moving it as is. We are here tonight because we are open to finding ways to address your concerns through site design and management of the site. This is and will continue to be a managed site. We have a history of working with St. Michael's Parish families in particular as we constructed the Plum Street Village, and that project has gone very well. That input helped us shape that model. We want to lean on that relationship as we look at the mitigation site move as well. I understand all of the concerns that have already been expressed through email to us and to the City Council. We are listening, and we are committed to doing all that we can to limit any impacts of the movement of the mitigation site. I appreciate all of you for being here tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Carrie.
Thank you very much, Jay. As we get started, I wanted to just share with everyone our agenda for tonight, so everyone knows what we are up to and where you come in, what your role will be. We are going to, again, I'm Carrie Retlin. I am the home fund manager, and I will be sharing a little bit about current mitigation operations. And then we will hear a little bit from Deputy Chief Sam Costello about the police department's plans for how they have been and will continue to support mitigation. And then we will hear a little bit from Gabe Ash with Catholic Community Services on staffing at the current site. And then we'll have time for the public to ask questions of us and share concerns. We hope to conclude tonight's meeting by 5 o'clock. I'm sorry, by 6 o'clock. And we'll continue this conversation on both our website and potentially in future meetings. So a little bit of background about mitigation. The site currently at 303 Franklin started as a sanctioned place for people to camp in downtown in 2018. Now the site has 80 what we call micro shelters. They're tiny houses without electricity. The site also has plumbed bathrooms and showers and 24-hour staffing provided by Catholic Community Services. In many ways, it runs a lot like other publicly funded shelters in our community. Mitigation is a place for people who can't get housing or shelter elsewhere, sometimes because of their background or disabilities, substance use challenges, and of course, because housing is expensive and very hard to find. We started mitigation in 2018 after the Martin versus Boise court decision because cities all over the West Coast, including Olympia, saw a really rapid increase in unsheltered homelessness in our downtowns. At that time, at one point, we had more than 150 people in tents all around our downtown. And so mitigation was open as a way to provide a safer, more stable, more consistent place for people to camp. And of course, it also helped reduce the impacts to businesses, to other people living downtown, so that people can continue to use downtown and go about their business, and we'd have a place safe for folks to camp. Fast forward a few years, now we're talking about moving mitigation because the city made a commitment that we would move the site after 3 years. Moving the site from its current location also creates an opportunity for us to reduce neighborhood impacts in that area, and also increase opportunities for folks at mitigation. We've just purchased a property last month for that purpose on Quince Street, a few blocks away. Mitigation supports a number of folks in our community. Anyone over 18 who's willing to sign and abide by a code of conduct can be considered for staying at the site. That includes folks with mental health or substance use challenges, and people who might have various criminal histories in their background prior to being released back to the community. That does not mean that there aren't guidelines and requirements for staying at mitigation. Like other shelters, violence, drug trafficking, other specific crimes or behaviors are not acceptable at the site and are a violation of the code of conduct, and could be also be reported, and often are reported, to the police, and could result in that person's exit from the site either for a period of time or permanently. People applying to stay at mitigation include and report on their background and their history when they apply, just as you would at staying at other shelters in the community. While they're there, well, that also means that people who in our community who might have backgrounds including sex offenses, when they apply and when they are talking with their correctional officer or a county contact for those programs, they also have to report and abide by those requirements and restrictions. Sometimes that means that they can't stay at mitigation because of various requirements of those programs. Currently, we have one person who is reporting to the county. They're a level 1 sex offender, which is the lowest risk to the community. Mitigation is the safest option for the 80 folks who stay there. And for many of them, it's the only place where they're welcome to be. We were really enthusiastic to purchase this property because it's an ideal site for affordable housing, and that's our long-term goal for the property. In the short term, we plan to move the mitigation site there, and then in the next few to 3-4 years, build affordable housing on that site in a few phases. The Quality Inn was also an important part of this conversation. We think that the Quality Inn was an important opportunity, or an important partner in social services in our city for a long time, and that this site is also special, not only to some of us who work for the city, but also for a lot of the folks at mitigation, because a number of them have used the Quality Inn over the years for hotel vouchers and other stays. Quality Inn was one of many partners in the community who worked with social service providers to provide hotel vouchers and other assistance for folks. So as far as supports for the neighborhood, we have some specific plans already to try and address some neighbor concerns. We realize there's been very little traffic in the area since the Quality Inn burned down. And so a shift to 80 tiny homes is going to be a big one. It's going to increase the amount of traffic, vehicle and pedestrian, no doubt. The city will have that area fenced to prohibit visitors, which are currently prohibited at the site, and to increase safety for folks who are staying there. That policy will remain at the new site. We'll also plan to have cameras at the new site for security and restrict potentially camping and RV overnight stays in the area. And our relationship with the police department at mitigation is also going to continue. And Deputy Chief Costello will talk a little bit about that now. Sam, welcome.
Thanks, Carrie. Talk a little bit, and I'm going to try to leave as much time as I can for people to give us input. So for us at the police department, as most of the city, we've watched the site downtown evolve from day one and get better and better as rules changed and things like that. And we found ways to interact at the camp that both allow for the community safety around there to be enhanced, but also for the people that are staying there. So I think what's important to say out of the gates is that these two sites are apples and oranges when it comes to public safety. Downtown is a little bit more difficult for us to manage, and I think this site's going to be from an emergency response standpoint, both in the police and fire department responses to a site like this. It's also a little more open. There are less places for criminal activity to occur that are not going to be right out in the open for everybody to see. I think the rules that were established at the last site were sort of a quick evolution, but they exist. And I think that's going to be a positive thing for the site as it gets implemented on Quince Street. It's going to be easier for us to predict some of the things. I can see some of the comments asking about camps around the site. Obviously, those are things that we can predict. And so those are things that we can plan to deal with as they come up. And it kind of depends on where they are, particularly if and when they start to develop, how we'll deal with them. I think what's most important for me to get across before we start in on taking some input and is that we do have resources to respond to these things. And they're resources that are not dedicated to other radio calls. And I think that for the community's peace of mind, what that means is we don't have officers that are going to prioritize calls coming into the mitigation site on Quince, much like we don't have anything pending prior that's more important than responding to the mitigation site right now downtown. And so we can use walk control, which is typically a downtown program, but we can use that in the mitigation site. It's a little bit out of where they would normally be, but it is downtown. And that's one of our resources. And we have the neighborhood policing units as well that can respond to the camp, as well as respond to areas around there and concerns from the neighborhood. So we do have a plan in place. We have learned a ton from the site that's in process right now. And while I expect that this site will be somewhat different, I don't expect that we're going to have a ton more problems than we have downtown right now. It's just going to be a little bit different in the way that we respond to it and how.
Thank you, Sam. I also wanted to introduce Gabe Ash from Catholic Community Services. He manages the team that staffs the mitigation site through a contract with the City of Olympia. Gabe, can you share a little bit more about what you've learned at mitigation since you've been staffing it, and who you serve, and share a little bit more about who you serve?
Sure, yeah. My name is Gabe Ash. I'm with Catholic Community Services, and CCS, when we considered taking on the contract to operate this site in 2020, one of the things we looked at is, does this align with our mission? And part of our mission that we have is to serve and support poor and vulnerable people, and to focus on communities struggling with poverty and the effects of intolerance and racism. And we felt that this site, much like Drexel House that I've been a part of for the last 15 years or so in Olympia, those are the type of people that are there, people that have been through a lot of trauma, people that have disabilities and that are struggling now. And so we were excited to get there on the ground and to start building relationships so that we could move people towards greater stability, health, and safety. So since we've been involved there, we have 24-hour staff. Our staffing, they keep shift notes so that every staff is aware of what's going on at the site. We're really excited, as Carrie mentioned, to be working towards getting security cameras on site. The staff does cleaning and relationship building with individuals to try to make sure that it's a safe environment for everyone. We have worked with the site to develop a site council. So we have some really great participants that stay there that are meet with us, our staff, every Monday and help to create their ideas and feedback on how to create more safety at the site and a better living environment for all of them. And we've started a weekly solution focused meeting as well. That's something in our other programs and shelters in CCS. A lot of times we'll invite neighborhood members if they have any concerns that pop up, there's a weekly meeting where you can come and meet with a CCS supervisor to work through those issues. So that's been something we've been excited about. People that we're serving, again, are a lot of vulnerable individuals with a lot of disabilities. And so they really need to be connected and supported towards supports, everything from sort of like in-home care, if they had a home where they need help with toileting and things like that, all the way to helping getting their ID, helping apply for housing. And we focused on increasing our case management. So with added case management, we've had some great successes in the last month. So in the last month, we've had 2 individuals move into apartments. We've had 5 people approved for housing and are working with our case manager to get into housing. And we've had 6 individuals get connected with medical care for the first time. And we've also had several people get signed up for substance use treatment. So we're excited about that, people making some positive changes in their lives. So we're excited to continue to partner with these individuals that stay there towards moving forward in their life and hopefully getting more stability outside of the mitigation site. And I think that's it. Back to you, Carrie.
Thank you very much, Gabe. And so now I want to make space in the rest of, or the bulk of the remainder of our evening tonight to take questions and listen to community and neighbor feedback and comments. I'm going to give, for starters, we're going to give folks 2 minutes to make comments. We're going to hold our responses until the end. We want to create as much opportunity for folks to ask questions and share as possible. And then depending on how much time we have, we can either come back to somebody for a second time or start to answer and speak to some of the questions and comments that we've heard. Use your raise hand function if you'd like to speak so that Krista can pull you into the conversation. Sean Curtis, welcome.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to start. I have a daughter at St. Mike's, and I also attended St. Mike's as a child. I've lived here my whole life. I'd like to start out with the biggest issue in my mind, which is what I brought up and pointed out to Gabe Ash at the meeting that was held at St. Mike's, is Washington state law prohibits level 2 and level 3 sex offenders from residing within 880 feet of a school. The mitigation site is less than 450 feet from school property. To date, I've not heard anyone comment or explain how that is, how the city of Olympia considers that to be legal. Aside from the fact it's completely irresponsible. I'd also like to point out that I know for a fact there is a lot of drug use in and around the current mitigation site. Not only have I heard that from law enforcement friends of mine, fire friends of mine, but healthcare workers who have cared for homeless in and around the mitigation site. It's a cesspool. And finally, there's essentially drug use has all but been legalized in Washington. The state, in its infinite wisdom, has found the current drug laws unconstitutional, and they are now simply a misdemeanor, with the first couple of offenses for a required treatment option be provided, which, as far as I know, is also not all but non-existent. And I'm pretty certain that is the case in Olympia. I'm pretty certain there are 0 law enforcement agents anywhere in Thurston County arresting for any type of drug use other than large sales of drugs. But as far as using them,
Sean, you have 15 seconds left.
Okay. I mean, as far as enforcing any kind of drug law, drug use in or around a mitigation site, I know better than that. It's not going to happen. And you're bringing this right next door to children. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Candace Mercer is next. Candace, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Carrie. I will say Carrie is a great person to work with. Make him your contact, learn his email and his phone number. You will need it. I'm Candace Mercer and I just ran for Olympia City Council. I come tonight to speak to the neighborhood affected by the relocation of the mitigation site. The council has a proven record of putting the needs of the urban camping street subculture above the rights of the rest of the community. They do not care about you or your neighborhood. That sounds harsh, but it is true. I know because I have seen it with my neighborhood. I live in the single family dwelling closest to the new shelter project. They held listening sessions for that project too. They see your neighbors as a problem to be managed, not families with legitimate concerns. We were promised a citizen advisory board for the 2828 Martin Way project. 2 months before opening, there is no board and no effort to convene one. My questions to Meg Martin have been ignored. I've been banned from participating on that board. Do not trust the city or the service providers to protect your neighborhood. The only way you can fight this is to organize. You must unite, share information, and have each other's backs. This is what Apple Hill did. Despite being in the epicenter of suffering, a half mile from the jungle in Ensign Street, we have kept our street clear for 2.5 years now. Our zero tolerance policy has improved conditions in our neighborhood. It is foolish to believe they will have better control of the mitigation site at the new location. If this was possible, why has it not occurred at the current location? Why? The evidence is in the number of OPD calls to the site. We can also clearly see a magnet effect that a site like this attracts other antisocial behavior, namely drug dealers who are servicing the camp. With drug dealing and use, there is violence, especially when it collides with severe mental health issues. To ignore this fact is magical thinking. I am on your side. If you would like advice, reach out to me. I put my email in the comments. I would be happy to meet with you and give you advice on how Apple Hill handled our problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. Eleen Lorenz, you're next. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I am speaking as a parent of 2 children at St. Michael's School. I also feel I come to this discussion with a unique perspective as I am the medical director at Southside Radiology across the street from St. Peter's Hospital, and I'm very much aware of the situation on Ensign Road and its impacts on the neighborhood. And the fact that anybody would consider moving this type of situation within 500 feet of a school is very distressing to me. The fact that my children will now have to deal with the issues I deal with as an adult every day at my place of business is very distressing. And knowing that sexual offenders could potentially be within 800 feet of my children's school is beyond distressing. One thing I would like to point out is that the Ensign Road, at least part of the Ensign Road camp, is being moved to Carpenter and Martin. At least that's the plan. And I sat in on a meeting with the county commissioners last week where the concerned citizens around that move were informed that only the elderly and most at risk were being moved to the Carpenter and Martin Way area, and only good neighbors would be moved to that area. So why are they being treated with that consideration, but our kids are not? At the meeting at St. Michael's, Kim Condrent let us know that there are currently no shelters in the area for women or children. Why can't this site be used for something like that? A low risk shelter for people, women and children. Why does it have to be open to sexual offenders? And I agree with previous questions that have been raised about the state law with sex offenders being within 800 feet of a school. That question has still not been answered or really acknowledged at all.
15 seconds left, Eleen.
Yep, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Rane Shaub, welcome.
Hi there. It's Rane Shaub for the record.
Rane,
Yes,
thanks.
thank you.
I'm sorry. I apologize too, because we spoke on the phone a while back as well, so I'm sorry.
We did, yes. Thank you, Carrie. Yes, I'm Rane Shaub. I'm the property owner of the the closest property there on Plum Street with the 76 station, the Les Schwab, Jimmy John's. We also operate the Les Schwab store there. So we're the closest business to this site. We have some serious concerns about this site. But I just wanted to note a couple of the comments in a recent article from September 5th stating from some of the local businesses near the current site saying there was no way we could open a storefront business down there in that neighborhood. People just wouldn't come. This was a quote of a nearby business owner. Another quote was, "It's an ongoing battle down here. We are very, very excited to have them moving out of here." And then the final quote was from Assistant City Manager Keith Staley, who is here, saying, "We understand that a facility like this is going to have impact." So it's quite clear everybody here knows what the negative impacts that are going to occur to these businesses and the school and the parents that we're hearing from as well. What is the city going to do to offset these? How can you give us something in exchange for this? Because this is going to be a huge detriment to our business. Our customers are not going to feel safe and comfortable coming into our business. What will the city do to offset these so that our businesses can survive? We invested a ton of money into the city and into our site several years ago when we moved to this location, and now we feel like that's being jeopardized and our business is at risk. So what will the city do to offset these negative effects? We're already dealing with many of them. Most recently, Sam Costello, our building almost burnt to the ground from a homeless lady that set our trash cans on fire out front there, and we're still reeling from that. We've had our manager held at knife point down there as well by another homeless person. This just can't continue for us to run a successful business down here. And it's quite clear from the other business owners at the site that were near the other site, it wasn't working for them. So I'd want to know what can we do to offset these significant negative impacts?
Thank you, Rane. Erich Ebel is next.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to meet with everybody tonight. I watched the video of the meeting that Kim Condrat and Gabe Ash had with St. Michael staff person. There were a lot of concerns raised at that meeting, and I still have not heard adequate answers to the concerns that were raised. I think one of the biggest problems that I have with all of this is that, for example, Mr. Retland, you have begun the evening by reading from a script, and Mr. Costello has been reading from a script, and many of you have been reading from a script. It's clear to me that you're maybe listening, but you're not hearing what we're trying to say, which is you have chosen to put our children at risk. And I'm sorry, I should have prefaced this by saying that I have 3 children who attend St. Michael's School. We are very embedded in the St. Michael school community, and it is grossly irresponsible to choose to cite a low barrier mitigation site that close to a school with small innocent children. I just cannot understand how you came to that conclusion that that was the right place to put these folks. These folks need services. These folks need help. They don't need another parking lot to sleep in. I'd like to encourage you to spend money that you already have that's going to other non-essential services and non-essential things and redirect it to fix this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark Boyer, welcome.
Thank you. I I would actually love to yield my time to give you guys a chance to respond to these questions. It is very frustrating to have these questions asked and not get any immediate response. Is that possible?
Well, our preference is, what we're hoping to do tonight is create time for everyone to share questions. And then at the end, depending on how much time we have, we can share more information, yes. But right now, we tried to share, and our intention was to try and speak to some of the things that came up tonight in our opening statements, but we really want to create as much space as possible for the public, for everyone to be able to share questions or comments, at least for starters.
Well, it'd be great if we could actually have a conversation instead of just a period of statements, because I think that would help us hear and feel exactly how you guys are treating this, instead of the point earlier about just written statements. But I guess my points, and I'll get to them here. What's it going to take for the city leadership to stop the madness of shifting things from one spot to another? And I'm not saying this tongue in cheek. I'm asking, like, legitimately, what is it going to take? Will it take my child being physically assaulted coming home from school? Will it take another child being kidnapped? Will it take violence on school site? And one thing that makes me so incredibly frustrated is hearing our mayor make a comment about the lack of violence amongst the groups that the city is managing. I think that is so negligent to assume that these folks with mental health issues that you guys have brought up, with drug abuse issues that you've brought up, that they're stable enough to coexist within 500 feet of a school without any sort of conflict or violence. The other point I would like to make, and Officer Costello, I don't know if you've got this, but I would love to know what those statistics are around crime and the current mitigation site, and if the new laws within the state of Washington are now going to prevent tracking that and enforcing that even further. And then lastly, for Mr. Burney and Mr. Staley, I've heard the Boise decision referenced so many times when it comes to homeless response. How much money have we spent over the last 4 or 5 years since that decision was made? And how much money could we have spent towards fighting that, and maybe taking a more humane approach that doesn't harm our community, that doesn't put our kids' safety at risk? It seems like we're focusing solely on that, yet the problem's only getting worse. So at what point do we just say enough's enough and take our fight somewhere else?
Thank you very much, Mark. Dennis Bracy, welcome.
Hey, man, how y'all doing? Through my research, according to the 2021 point in time information you guys have provided somewhere through the city council, there's over 1,100 homeless people in Thurston County alone. And based on the fact that I've heard numbers as high as $3 to $6 million a year to operate these tiny homes, just based off of $1 million, you can spend $100 a night at a hotel and house 27 people where they have heat, they have running water, they have security, they have a lock on the door. So how can anybody think that doing the same thing Seattle and King County is doing, which they're spending $100 million a year on homelessness, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse? I have a child at St. Mike's. Besides that, there are 2 other schools in the area that I don't believe the parents are aware of this. The information is not getting out there. This is unsafe for the children. It's unsafe for the businesses and anyone that works down there. And with that said, if you guys are just willing to pump money into the homeless industry complex, somebody's getting rich and the homeless are not being helped. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Dennis. Joanne Kerrigan, welcome.
Thanks. My name is Philip. I'm actually Joanne's husband. I also have 3 kids who go to St. Mike's. And look, I understand there's no doubt that this is a really complex, complicated issue. Didn't happen overnight, and solutions won't happen overnight either. My concerns continue to be just two major concerns. And that is obviously the number one is the safety and security of my kids. And the second is the actual long-term solution that this move actually provides. So in terms of the safety to my kids, a lot of folks have already said what, kind of what I'm going to try and paraphrase here. And that is that the mitigation site downtown and the management within it did not seem to be the big problem. The challenges, as I could see, not only going downtown, but speaking with businesses downtown, definitely seem to be the periphery of that particular spot. And the question of how the city plans to prevent these same issues that currently happen downtown that made this situation untenable, how they're going to stop those from happening at my kids' school on their football field still has not yet been answered. And the city has done a lot of reimagining of policing, which makes me very hesitant and makes me concerned that answers will not go called if they're not of a certain kind. The second thing is definitely the long-term solution to this particular issue. We continue to just sort of build tiny homes and create sites that folks can stay at. This particular site is really miles away from the food bank. It's miles away from councils, from more than just one counselor on site, I believe. It's really not very close to the resources that a lot of folks who are experiencing homeless need. And the previous Plum site was a transitionary housing site. What is this site? Is it low barrier? Is it high barrier? And is it transitionary? So there's some of the questions that just continue sort of not to be answered. And it does make for folks who would probably help you in this situation hesitant to do so. And that's what I have.
Thank you. And we'll start speaking to questions at 5:45. So we'll take questions from you all and comments from you all until then. And we'll speak to the questions, many of the questions you brought up, including, low barrier and what that means. Mayleen, welcome. Mayleen.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is Mayleen and I have 3 children at St. Michael's School. Thank you for the opportunity to address you all about our concerns at the issue at hand. I've heard it mentioned that it is not a crime to be homeless and that it is wrong to criminalize homelessness. Indeed, I agree that is right. As a Catholic Christian, I do see these men and women as brothers and sisters in Christ who are in desperate need of help and assistance. And I thank all the organizations who are trying to help with what they can. Perhaps indeed those that live at the mitigation site are not criminals, but it is the other activities and people and traffic around the periphery of this site that is concerning to me. A couple of meetings ago, a parent mentioned that several blocks radiating out from the current mitigation site, you can see the effects and trouble like a nuclear fallout zone. What I want to understand is, knowing what you know of what happens around the periphery of this mitigation site, that you are truthfully and absolutely comfortable moving this site to within a few blocks, a few feet away from young children. If this site were moved next to your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews' school, would you feel absolutely comfortable? It doesn't seem prudent. It's like inviting sure and certain danger and risk to vulnerable children. Thank you for listening.
Uh-oh, I didn't unmute myself. Thank you, Mayleen. Dave Thistle, welcome. David. We can come back to you, David.
Okay, I'm here again.
Oh, there you are. Great, we can hear you.
I'm sorry. I understand the move. I see this as a huge win for downtown businesses, if not Les Schwab and residents, and hopefully for the houseless members of our community, for whom I have a great deal of compassion. I know many of them. However, I am terribly concerned that this will further problems for the southeast neighborhoods, including schools of Olympia that are already confronting numerous public health, safety, and environmental hazards from the expansive encampments along Wheeler Avenue in the urban woods nearby and beneath and around freeway overpasses and interchanges. My questions for you folks are as follows. Is the Quince Street location expected to be a potential destination for current residents along Wheeler, Deschutes Parkway, and other scattered sites? And what is the projected number of residents for the Quince Street site? 2, the pedestrian and bicycle traffic along Wheeler is already quite high and often dangerous and unpredictable. Have you anticipated how the Quince Street location and its expected increase in available social services for scattered site residents will further exacerbate the already prolific pedestrian traffic along Wheeler, East Side, and other nearby streets? Thank you all for your continued efforts in providing compassionate supports for our most vulnerable residents. And I close with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Lisa Streidinger, you're next. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Lisa. I am an advocate here in Washington State for those experiencing homelessness. I hear the concerns of the community, and I just wanted to share that I know that there have been many positive outcomes from sites like this across Washington State. And these are people experiencing the crisis of homelessness as well. And bringing them into the walls of a mitigation site helps mitigate their crisis to be able to bring them services so they are not unwell out on our streets. And when I asked my grandchildren, who are 6 and 7, would you rather have grandma working in a prison setting as a counselor, or would you rather have me working with homeless individuals? My grandchildren said, Grandma, everybody needs a home. And when they are managed well, they said everybody needs a home. And children know that we need places to live. And the safety of our children are first and foremost. I know not every city council member has the greatest things in their heart for the people, because sometimes our city council where I come from isn't the best. But I do know that people that are in these social services positions care very deeply for the residents. And I also know that the social services in your city are amazing. I've seen people reach out in areas that I've never seen before. I come from a very rural community where we don't have these outreaches, and the mitigation site is saving lives. And I understand it might not be in the exact location, but I know that there are people in this and many other sites that are just as important and at one time were somebody's child, and they matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Whitney Bowerman. Welcome, Whitney.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the worst Zoom person ever. So, okay, hopefully I've not touched anything wrong. So there's been a lot of focus on the school, and I want to remind everyone there is an entire neighborhood adjacent to this where I live. I live in the East Side. I live 1 block up from St. Mike's. I've lived there for 20 years. I'm having a little bit of deja vu in this conversation because 8 years ago, we had very similar conversations in our neighborhood, including with St. Mike's families when the Interfaith Works shelter was looking to locate on the edge of the East Side neighborhood. Very similar fears. I was someone that came wholeheartedly against the program. Long story short, I got involved with the program, started learning more about it. And we've been supporting that shelter program for 8 years now. I've been super impressed with how it's managed. I think the bottom line for me as a neighbor who lives and works 24/7 right up the street from this, and my kids also go to Madison School right down the street, is that this is a problem that is existing in our community and it's not going away. So we always talk about these people, these homeless people. they live here, they are here, and I would much rather have them receive services on a managed site than just have, not have that. So I have found much more comfort as someone in the neighborhood with a lot of social services in our neighborhood, with having people that I can contact and have relationships with the programs. So yeah, I guess I want to be a vote of support for moving the site. I mean, I know it's not easy. There's citing this. No one wants this in their backyard. That's what happens every time we have one of these programs that has to be cited. So it's going to be a hard conversation no matter what, but I think the location makes a lot of sense. I'm glad it will be managed. And I hope that we can really double down on focusing on more permanent housing, because ultimately that's what we need in our community, is more permanent housing.
Thank you very much, Whitney. Now I wanted to make time for myself and the panel to start to respond to some of your questions. I think one question that I heard more than once was is this low barrier? And that's a term of art in shelter and affordable housing. And really, barriered services are a spectrum, and what low barrier means is that there are fewer barriers to accessing the site. So examples of barriers could be substance use, could be behavioral challenges, it could be having pets. So on that spectrum of things, mitigation is a pretty low barrier site, in the sense that the site tries to work with folks who have substance use challenges. That's not necessarily a reason for somebody to not be allowed access to the site and the program. Likewise, people with other mental health challenges are welcome, and as are people who have pets, other things like that. Prior criminal history is also not necessarily a barrier to the program. However, if that person's, another question that's come up related to barriers, and Sam, I may need your help on this, but if Department of Corrections or the county has specific requirements related to a person's release for their sex offenses, for example, then obviously the city is going to support those state and county requirements as far as their release and where they are allowed to stay in the community. The city is not going to, nor could we challenge the state's requirements around where a, proximity to somebody's release if there are specific distance requirements for somebody's release related to a sex offense. So that's, I think, hopefully that speaks to the low barrier question. Gabe, another question that we heard was qualifications of Catholic Community Services staff in the chat. Could you talk a little bit about staff background?
Sure, yeah. So Catholic Community Services is a large private nonprofit. It's, I think, the largest in Washington, in Western Washington, as far as a social service agency. And so within that, we have a lot of agency policy and structure that we operate under, and lots of things like incident reporting and safety protocols and things like that. Our staff that we hire, we have case managers there, and also program generalists that are working there. And we have a site supervisor, Candace, that's oversees those staff. I supervise Candace. I'm a mental health professional and an MSW. I've been working in Olympia for 15 years with this population. And then we have a visiting supervisor from CCS that helps oversee rule violations. So we take very seriously low barrier and harm reduction that Carrie was talking about doesn't mean there's no rules and no consequences. And so we take very seriously safety and health of everyone there and our neighbors as well. And so when there's a contract violation that someone has violated, there's a process that we follow through on that. And part of that is the outside supervisor coming in and deciding what needs to happen. And that's a little bit about our staffing there.
Thank you, Gabe. Sam, I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to some of the questions about crimes in and around and planning for response in the future. And also if you have more to add related to sex offender citing.
Yes, I'll start with the sex offender citing, just try and go in order, maybe backwards from where you went. The sex offender citing, obviously, we're going to comply with the state law. We're going to require people to be where their statutory requirements are per their level of sex offender reporting. I think it's important to mention that all over the county that sex offender management is handled by the sheriff's office, which is per RCW. So that is the state law that they manage that. We assist in some ways with that by notifying the public when we know that we have someone in the area that matches criteria that requires notice. But the checking in all occurs through the sheriff's office. Again, that's state law. As far as a response to crimes there, I saw a question in the text about the statistics for the current mitigation site. And I'll just, at the peril of I hope everybody understands, it's very difficult for me to give you accurate statistics they may seem low, they may seem high. To some, it's difficult to say what comes from the mitigation site and what doesn't, because as somebody I think said, there are some effects of the mitigation site that we see that are a little bit away from there, that may or may not be from people that are there. It's for us, we don't ask that question. We're very often when we have things like that downtown. So it's difficult for us to come up with really accurate statistics about that. If for that site and that site alone, I don't think that the statistics are going to be very useful for an analysis of what this site's going to look like, nor is it a very accurate picture of what it looks like down there right now either. Because some of the activity happens around the site. And so in our system, it doesn't go into that address. So it's difficult to track that. And then I'll move to drug enforcement. Drug enforcement is obviously governed by state law and it's governed by case law. There have been some changes in Washington state law with regard to drug enforcement. And so it does require us, when we come upon people that are low level, and that means using, for the most part, drug offenders, we are referring them and we are obligated to try to get them into treatment or at least offer treatment to them. And we're doing that. And we're also keeping a database of people that have been referred for a drug offense. And it does take 2 times prior to an offense. And I think somebody accurately said then it becomes a misdemeanor. And so the time that it becomes a felony above that is the higher level, either distribution or larger levels, possession with intent, or distribution, delivery, that kind of thing, is when you're going to get the felony charge just by state law at this point.
Thank you, Sam. Jay, do you have more that you would like to add?
Yes, thanks, Carrie. I just wanted to address a few things, and I appreciate the opportunity. First, there was a statement made in the beginning that that we don't care and that the city council doesn't care. And I just want to say that the city council cares deeply about this issue. They care deeply about the neighborhoods. Our staff, our nonprofits care deeply about this community, and we're working hard at this. This is a very complex issue. It's really above any one city and what they can do on their own. We are giving every resource we can towards this, and I agree, it's not enough, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating for us as it is for you. But mitigation site has resolved some issues that we've had in terms of, we've had a lot of encampments in doorways and all over the place, and we don't see those like we did before because we have different opportunities. And I see Deputy Chief shaking his head because we're not having those conflicts with business owners like we did in the past because we have a mitigation site. there's a question about the Boise decision and would it be more costly to fight the Boise decision? And that's not something we can do. The Supreme Court was asked to take up the Boise decision and they declined, which means there's nothing more that can be done to fight the Boise decision. So that leaves us in a place where the Boise decision still is in effect for cities like us, which says anybody that's on a piece of public property, we have to provide another alternative. We can't just shoo them along to somewhere else. So we're doing the best we can with what we have and with the mitigation site. We set up the Plum Street Village. We're thankful to the community to pass a home fund. Ms. Mercer talked about 2828 Martin Way, and I'm really proud of that because that is our first home fund site. It's 60 beds of permanent supportive housing that the city helped make happen with the support of this community through the home fund. And what will it take to stop shifting around the way we are? We need more support from the state. They need to get into this game. We need mental health resources. We need more drug rehab facilities. Those are not things that cities can build and run with the resources that we have. We need state assistance, and it's going to take all of us to do that. I want to remind everyone that, we're really early in this process. We're here tonight because we do care deeply and we want to try to get this right. And so I've heard concerns around tonight expressed around people camping in and around the area. I've heard concerns expressed around loitering and impacts on businesses. I've heard concerns expressed tonight about sex offenders on site. I've heard concerns expressed about drug use and crime and security. And we're going to take everything we heard tonight and we're going to regroup as a staff, and we're going to do everything we can to address all of the concerns that were raised tonight and develop both a site plan and a management plan to address those concerns. And we will be back out to the community to talk with you all about what we've come up with. So I want to just express my appreciation for all of you being here. I know this is a hard conversation. I know how hard it is for all of you that have kids that have fears. We are going to do everything we can to address those. So I just wanted to make those comments and just appreciate you all for coming. It's a complex issue and we're working hard on it.
Thank you very much, everyone. In addition, we're also going to be setting up a web page so that we can keep you current on this conversation and post, as Jay mentioned, frequently asked questions that have come up tonight and will continue to come up throughout this conversation. And of course, we'll also post there more information on future meetings and ways to stay informed and engaged on this topic. Thank you very much.